If I were just beginning and I received an email like this, I might just classify this as a unmotivated, dead lead, just kind of put this on the back burner. But knowing what I know now, you got to hop on the phone right away. This was the perfect setup for a subject to. All right, so my very first subject to deal, we were wholesaling, I think, for about a year and a half, full-time wholesaling, and I got into real estate for the passive income. I had purchased one rental property a couple of years prior, had my second one underway. Wholesaling was not really what I wanted to be doing full-time with my life. It was a grind. It was a roller coaster, lots of downs, some ups when the deals came through. But this whole time we were learning about creative financing, that I was being told that subject to is an awesome way to build a portfolio. If only I had known this a little bit sooner, I could have saved like a year and a half of my life from the hells of wholesaling. So my very first subject to deal, I had been acquainted with the process, how to talk to sellers a little bit about it, and what we were going to do on the back end to make a subject to deal profitable. Now, we had almost landed our first one because, and I'll talk about this deal in a future episode, but we were wholesaling a property, and it turned out that the guy didn't have the cash to bring to closing, the seller that is, because his mortgage payment was so high that our wholesale contract fell through with him and our buyer. That deal fell apart, and then we ended up buying that one subject to just a few months later. And one thing we learned from that deal, which I'll just fast forward real quick, is that you can target failed wholesale deals. They can be fantastic subject to deals. Whatever, back to our very first subject to deal. Guys, the thing I did not realize was that you can make the equivalent of a wholesale fee on a subject to deal if you have the right exit strategy in place. So up until this point, our wholesale fees, they were anywhere from $1,000 or even less, I think, on our worst wholesale deal, up to $75K, which is an awesome wholesale fee. But here in a Midwest market, those are few and far in between, and you really have to hustle to get those contracts locked up and moved. So we took the path less traveled and started marketing to low equity leads. And that's where this lead came from. I'm going to talk about where in this YouTube channel, really, I'm just going to be walking through all of the subject to deals. We've done about 24 of them and about 30 plus 30 properties that we own and cash flow and have done creative things with. So, but the very first one came from an expired listing. And I just want to share everything with the viewers so that if you are a new investor, you're not sure where to begin. You've heard creative financing. It sounds very sexy, but you're not sure if you want to sign up with a coaching program or pay the money to sit under one of these gurus who are going to teach you supposedly everything. How about just listen to somebody newer to the game like myself? We did our first one less than 2 years ago, back in 21 August. So you can listen to somebody like myself who's now done 24 of these subject to deals and learn from my mistakes, the things we could have done better, and then you can begin to piece together your own deals and really see the nitty-gritty of what goes into these, from the marketing side to talking with sellers to structuring the deal to rehab that might have to take place to placing a buyer or a tenant, all the ins and outs of dealing with insurance. And we have some horror stories to share with you. This was an awesome first subject to deal, and it really proved the concept that you can make cash up front, you can cash flow the deal, and then there'll be cash later. I borrow that from Nick Lagamaro, who does creative note structuring, but it's basically the model of cash now, cash flow, cash later. So this deal, I'll show you the email that the seller sent me. This was an expired MLS listing. We learned quickly that we needed to make friends with real estate agents who would set up an auto email campaign for us to send us every expired listing. So as soon as a listing expires on the MLS, it'll get marked with an X, meaning expired, and then that can get emailed to you to show you that it is no longer under contract with the listing agent. And these are fantastic subject to lead sources. They're one of my favorite, and there's numerous reasons why. I'll tell you about that in another video. But we wrote a letter. I wrote a letter to this seller. I think this was a batch of several recent expireds that I hand wrote some letters, but this came from a letter that was printed using a mail house. I think they signed my name, hand addressed it on a physical envelope, and mailed it to the owner. And she responded back not with a phone call, not with a text message, which does happen, not with a web form, which could have happened, but she responded with an email because we included on our letter an email address. So here's a little pro tip just for beginners. You craft your message, but make sure that you have your phone number, an email address, a website if you have one. You don't have to have one when you're first beginning, but it helps to build credibility. This person reached out via email, and that is somewhat unusual. Most people reach out via phone, but I'll pull up the email, and the thing that strikes me about this email, it's an amazing specimen case example, because she sets up such a strong barrier because she had been on the market with several realtors. She had several cash offers. None of them could make the deal work, and she needed to move out of state. So she sets up some strong barriers, and you'll see what exactly she says and how I responded to it. So, good afternoon, Hans. And I blocked out her personal info here, but you can see that this email came actually May 17th, 2021. That deal, I think we closed in August. So that's just a interesting data point right there that we courted this lead for, what was it, May, June, July, 3 months before we actually closed it. But she wrote and said, "Good morning," or "Good afternoon, Hans. I received your letter, and to give it to you straight, I don't think you can assist with purchasing my home." Well, then why are you emailing me, Miss Seller? This is a cry of desperation, and it kind of was. But she says, in short, I need $120,541, so $120,000 to sell my home free and clear. The appraised value I received on it a few months ago also is putting the house at $125,000. So that tells me she had an appraisal done. Probably wasn't her who paid for it, but probably a buyer who got under contract, and the contract fell through. The appraisal came back and the payoff was too high, and the buyer didn't want to come to close with cash to cover that gap. But look at what she's saying. I need $120,000 to be free and clear of this thing. And apparently she owes too much to pay the realtor fees, to do any repairs that might be requested of her. Usually with these cash offer places, meaning cash buyers who market to her and want to give her a cash offer, you guys only give offers between $80,000 and $95,000 at best. Now, I'll tell you, that is a high cash offer for a house that might be worth like $120,000. If you got that cash offer and could take it, you should take it. But she ended up owing like $120,000. So if that is around the figure that your company will be offering, then you won't be able to assist me, unfortunately. So she set up a strong barrier. She assumes that we are cash buyers, and this is the magic of being a creative financier, a subject to person, is you can differentiate yourself real quick with the seller and say, hey, I can give you a cash offer. In fact, maybe I'll set the precedent with telling you, here's what my cash offer would be. Would this work for you, Mr. or Miss Seller? Oh, you owe this much? It wouldn't work for you? I can offer you full asking price, or I can offer you at least as much as your mortgage payment is. So anyways, I was not that suave when I first started this, but she continues. Also, I have been presented with the offer to lease to own /rent, which is something I have no interest in since I'll be states away, meaning she's moving out of state. She doesn't want to be a landlord. Somebody came along, an investor came along and offered to do a lease option. And she kind of saw through that and said, nah, I don't want to be a landlord to an investor who might mess my property up and then I have to deal with it again. Another pro tip, if you're talking with sellers who have engaged investors who are wanting to do a sandwich lease, an option, then you can come right in there and be like, hey, this is not that. We take title to the property and own it. You are done. She continues, and I am not looking for another real estate agent to waste my time. I don't know who her agents were. I could go back and look, but the reality is probably that they did not do their due diligence, the realtors, to find out what she owed when they signed the listing agreement. They should have done that due diligence to know, here's how much you owe, here's how much we can get it, here's the commission. Oh, this isn't going to work for you. If only I knew a guy who bought houses subject to. She says, the price is what is in order for me to walk away from the house. In other words, you got to come at me with $120,000, and nobody's been able to do it. And I'm certainly not going to do it as a cash buyer. She knows that. She says, if you can meet that number, and that is before closing fees, then I will gladly answer further questions. If you can't, then we have nothing further to discuss. If I were just beginning and I received an email like this, I might just classify this as a unmotivated, dead lead, and just kind of put this on the back burner. But knowing what I know now, you got to hop on the phone right away. This was the perfect setup for a subject to. And I'm telling you, these expired listings, these folks have been through the ringer. They've been through all of the hassles of putting a house on the market. If you've never sold a house on the market, you're wholesaling, but you've never sold your own primary residence, and you've had to deal with getting your house ready to be presented, talking with the agent, getting the listing agreements, and having people come through, and dealing with the offers and the appraisals and the inspection contingent. It is a hassle. And then to have it fall through a couple times and have cash buyers, all investors who are kind of always the backup option, not be interested in your house because you owe too much, you're literally at a loss for what to do unless there's somebody like this who can solve the problem. And hopefully that'll become you in your local market. So now I was in a coaching program to learn how to deal with this. And it turned out to be a pivot point in our business because once we did this deal, guys, the house was immaculate. It needed no work. It had passed the occupancy inspection recently. She'd only lived in there for a year. So there was literally nothing we needed to do to the house. And all we needed to do was make her mortgage payments. And we didn't give her any cash at closing because there was no equity in the property. We quickly turned the house around, we placed somebody in it, and we collected a fee up front. So we actually made $5,000 on the fee that we collected up front without doing any work. And since it was a rent-to-own situation, we're not landlords. We didn't have property management. We're not fixing stuff. They're off to the races. So we collected $5,000 up front, which is the equivalent of a modest wholesale fee in our market. It cash flows. I think it started off to be about $260 a month. That actually increased to $350 after there was an escrow shortage because she was behind on payments and had done a loan modification. But so now we're at $350 cash flow because the escrow account got caught up, and that's all stuff I can discuss later. So $350 a month cash flow, that number doesn't change. There's some equity on the back end, which honestly we just created out of thin air by marking up the value of the house because we were offering seller financing. We could sell the house for more than it was worth because of the value add that we had. So we created equity kind of out of thin air to make money on the back end. We're cash flowing it, and we made money up front. And after we did this deal, I was like, why would we ever want to wholesale ever again? We have an appreciating asset. It's cash flowing. Let's do more of these. So here's how I responded. Good afternoon, ma'am. What's a good number to reach you at? I had a chance to look into the house a bit, and I have a proposal for you that will allow us to give you your full asking price so you can walk away from the property and mortgage. Guys, I got lucky in the way I handled this because I definitely would have screwed this up just had I sat down and thought about my response for an hour. But I said, I'm going to give you your full asking price, $120 1.5, whatever it was, and I had in my mind, of course, subject to, so you can walk away from the property and the mortgage, because that's ultimately what she wanted. She wanted to be able to move to another state, and she did. And she was extraordinarily thankful. But the way that I put this in the email is just short and sweet. And this was enough to allure her into a phone conversation. Basically, I got her on the phone, and I probably fumbled around. This was my first time a ton. And then we got an appointment with her. I'll have to look for the next video, because I'm going to continue on this deal to tell you exactly what the numbers were, how we got it under contract, what was in the contracts, and our plan, what interest rate we were getting, and then what we were going to charge when we turned around to sell it. That's it. So if a seller comes to you with low equity and they put their house on the market and it's expired and they've said, there's no way you can buy my house, Mr. Investor. You just sit back, you say, hold my beer, watch me buy your house for full asking price. You can walk away and never have to worry about your house ever again. The rest is history. So next video, I will tell you more about this deal. If you like this video, found some value in it, please like it, subscribe, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you more about our journey in creative finance and subject to investing, and what an amazing strategy this is to build cash flow rapidly with little to no money out of pocket. Truly is amazing.